For years, In the Heat of the Night made small-town crime feel tense, emotional, and dangerously real. But after 38 years, the cast's real lives became even darker than the cases they solved on screen. Many of the stars have sadly passed away, and only one major cast member is still alive today. Join us as we uncover what really happened to them after 38 years, because some of these stories may truly surprise you. Hugh O'Connor as Lieutenant Lonnie Jameson. Lieutenant Lonnie Jameson is youthful optimism trying to survive inside a world already filled with exhaustion, violence, and emotional scars. Hugh O'Connor, born April 7, 1962, was 26 when In the Heat of the Night began in 1988, and he gave Lonnie a warmth and sincerity that balanced the darker tone of the series. He felt younger, more hopeful, and less emotionally hardened than many of the older officers around him. Yet beneath that security was a lifelong emotional struggle tied to identity, loneliness, and the pressure of living as the son of one of television's most famous stars. Off-screen, Hugh's personal life became consumed by addiction. He began abusing drugs as a teenager and spent years trapped in a cycle of rehabilitation attempts, emotional instability, and relapse. His marriage to Angela Clayton in 1992 and the birth of their son briefly offered hope, but the addiction continued destroying his mental health and relationships behind the scenes. On March 28, 1995, the same day as his third wedding anniversary, Hugh O'Connor died by suicide at the age of 32 after locking himself inside his Pacific Palisades home during a severe drug episode. His death devastated Carol O'Connor and became one of the darkest tragedies connected to the series. Carol O'Connor as Chief Bill Gillespie. Chief Bill Gillespie is the aging lawman whose gruff authority, sharp instincts, and hidden loneliness made In the Heat of the Night feel far more emotional than a typical crime drama. Carol O'Connor, born August 2, 1924, was 64 when the series began in 1988, and he gave Gillespie the weight of a man exhausted by both responsibility and change. Gillespie could be stubborn, sarcastic, and intimidating, but O'Connor always allowed audiences to sense the intelligence and sadness underneath. That discomfort made him human. Before the series, O'Connor had already transformed American television history through his legendary role as Archie Bunker in All in the Family, earning 4 Emmy Awards before later winning another Emmy for In the Heat of the Night. Yet the greatest tragedy of his life happened away from cameras. His only son, Hugh O'Connor, struggled with severe drug addiction for years, despite repeated rehab attempts organized by his father. In 1995, Hugh died by suicide, a loss that devastated O'Connor and changed the rest of his life. Carol. O'Connor died on June 21, 2001, at the age of 76 after suffering a heart attack linked to complications from diabetes and heart disease. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $25 million. After losing his son, O'Connor spent much of his remaining life publicly fighting against drug dealers and speaking openly about addiction and grief. Chief Bill Gillespie endures because Carol O'Connor made authority feel weary, complicated, and deeply vulnerable beneath the badge. Howard E. Rollins, Jr. as Virgil Tibbs. Virgil Tibbs is intelligence under pressure, the calm and disciplined detective whose dignity gave In the Heat of the Night its moral center. Howard E. Rollins, Jr., born October 17, 1950, was 37 when the series began in 1988, and he gave Tibbs a quiet authority that made every room feel tense the moment he entered it. Tibbs was sharp, composed, principled, and emotionally restrained, but that restraint is what made the character powerful. Rollins played him with intelligence, exhaustion, and pride all at once. But behind the scenes, his life slowly collapsed under addiction. During the series, Rollins battled severe alcoholism and drug dependency that led to repeated arrests for drug possession and drunk driving. The scandals became so overwhelming that the production could no longer continue working around them, forcing the show to remove Virgil Tibbs entirely during the 6th season. After losing the role that defined him, his career declined rapidly, and his final years became increasingly isolated and unstable. Howard Rollins died on December 8, 1996, at the age of 46, only 6 weeks after being hospitalized with lymphoma connected to severe immune system complications. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $10 million through years of successful film and television work. His death shocked many fans because the brilliance of his talent had always seemed larger than the chaos surrounding him. Alan Autry as Captain Bubba Skinner. Captain Bubba Skinner is the rough-edged Southern cop whose toughness, loyalty, and stubborn pride helped give In the Heat of the Night its working-class heartbeat. Alan Autry, born July 31, 1952, was 36 when the series began in 1988, and he gave Bubba the feeling of a man constantly fighting between old instincts and basic decency. Bubba could be loud, aggressive, and hot-tempered, but that tension is exactly what made him believable. That emotional friction also gave the character weight. Off-screen, Autry's own life became turbulent during his early Hollywood years as drug and alcohol addiction helped destroy his first marriage to Vicki Brown. One of the biggest turning points of his life came in 1981, when he accidentally reunited with his biological father after 30 years apart while filming Southern Comfort. The experience led him to reclaim the surname Autry and later rebuild his life through Christianity and sobriety. In 2026, Autry is 74 years old, and his life after In the Heat of the Night became a story of reinvention. He remarried Kimberly Autry in 1994 and remained with her for more than 3 decades until her death in 2025. After leaving acting, he surprised many fans by entering politics and serving as mayor of Fresno, California from 2001 to 2009. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million, Autry's journey feels larger than television itself. Captain Bubba Skinner endures because Alan Autry made toughness feel restless, flawed, and painfully human. Lois Nettleton as Joanne St. John. Joanne St. John is elegance, carrying hidden loneliness, the refined woman whose intelligence and emotional restraint brought a softer kind of tension into In the Heat of the Night. Lois Nettleton, born August 16, 1927, was 61 when the series began in 1988, and she gave Joanne a maturity and grace that felt deeply rooted in classic television drama. Nettleton played her with quiet intelligence, patience, and emotional control that hinted at deeper sadness beneath the surface. Off-screen, her real life carried much of that same solitude. Her only marriage to famous radio personality Gene Shepard ended in divorce after just 7 years and produced no children. Afterward, she lived a largely private and isolated life, pouring most of her energy into acting rather than public celebrity. She appeared in productions such as The Twilight Zone and The Golden Girls, while also winning 2 Daytime Emmy Awards during her long career. That distance from Hollywood glamour gave her performances a different kind of realism. Lois Nettleton died on January 18, 2008, at the age of 80 after battling lung cancer during the final years of her life. At the time of her death, her estimated net worth was around $2 million. Unlike many television stars, she spent her later years far from scandal and publicity, living quietly while her work continued speaking for itself. Carl Weathers as Chief Hampton Forbes. Chief Hampton Forbes is authority wrapped in calm confidence, the polished police leader whose presence brought discipline, experience, and quiet strength into In the Heat of the Night. Carl Weathers, born January 14, 1948, was 45 when he joined the series in 1993, and he gave Forbes the feeling of a man who had already survived harder battles before entering the room. Weathers played him with composure, intelligence, and the kind of confidence that comes from experience rather than ego. Off-screen, however, his personal life was far less stable than his screen image suggested. Despite decades of success, his 3 marriages all ended in divorce, including relationships with Mary Ann Castle, Rona Unsell, and Jennifer Peterson. The emotional and financial toll of those breakups left long periods of loneliness behind the fame. Years of professional football and physically demanding action roles also damaged his body over time, especially after decades of performing heavy stunt work himself. Carl Weathers died peacefully in his sleep on February 1, 2024, at the age of 76. Medical reports later confirmed the cause of death as atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease after years of declining heart health. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $8 million. His passing shocked generations of fans because he represented a rare kind of movie star charisma that still felt warm and approachable. Dennis Lipscomb as Mayor Jim Finley. Mayor Jim Finley is power hiding behind politeness, the cold and calculating politician whose smile always seemed to conceal another agenda. Dennis Lipscomb, born April 22, 1942, was 46 when In the Heat of the Night began in 1988, and he gave Finley the unsettling calm of a man who understood how to manipulate fear, influence, and public image. Lipscomb played him with restraint, intelligence, and emotional distance, making the character more intimidating than openly explosive villains. Off-screen, his own life remained unusually private for a Hollywood actor. He never married, had no children, and stayed far away from celebrity culture. Yet behind that quiet life was frustration tied to his career itself. Years of being typecast into supporting roles left him feeling that his talent was often underestimated, despite his ability to dominate scenes with very little dialogue. Even Lipscomb had built a reputation playing unstable authority figures and morally questionable men in films like War Games, The Final Countdown, and Under Siege. Dennis Lipscomb died on November 6, 2014, at the age of 72 after suffering a fatal head injury from a staircase fall inside his Glendale, California home. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $1.5 million. His sudden death shocked many character actor fans because he had spent decades quietly becoming one of Hollywood's most reliable faces in political thrillers and crime dramas. Margaret Bly as Gillespie's girlfriend. Gillespie's girlfriend is warmth entering a world built on tension, the gentle presence who revealed a softer and more vulnerable side of Chief Bill Gillespie. Margaret Bly, born October 24, 1942, joined In the Heat of the Night in her late 40s during the late 1980s, and she brought elegance and emotional calm into the series. What made her role matter was how naturally she softened Gillespie without changing who he was. Bly played the relationship with patience and understated charm, giving the crime drama moments of humanity between the violence and investigations. Long before the show, Bly had already built a respected Hollywood career during the 1960s and 1970s, appearing alongside Paul Newman in Hombre and Michael Caine in The Italian Job. Her screen presence always carried a mixture of beauty, intelligence, and quiet emotional maturity. Off-screen, however, her own life reflected the harsh reality. As the years passed, her career slowly faded from the spotlight, and she spent much of her later life living privately with family in West Hollywood. She never married and remained largely removed from celebrity culture during her final years. Margaret Bly died on March 24, 2016, at the age of 73 after a long battle with uterine cancer. At the time of her death, her estimated net worth was around $1.2 million. Though her later years were quieter than her early Hollywood success, fans still remembered the grace and emotional warmth she brought to the screen. Bob Penny as Alvin P. Epp. Alvin P. Epp is small-town authority wrapped in old-fashioned Southern formality, the kind of figure who could make a room feel uncomfortable without ever raising his voice. Bob Penny joined In the Heat of the Night in the late 1980s while already in his 50s, and he brought the character a calm intelligence shaped by a life far removed from traditional Hollywood ambition. Penny played him with quiet authority and the steady rhythm of someone who understood people more than he tried to impress them. Off-screen, he lived more like a respected professor than a Hollywood actor. Unlike many actors, Penny spent most of his adult life teaching English literature at the University of Alabama at Birmingham for more than 2 decades before acting became a serious part of his career. His academic background gave him a composed and thoughtful presence that later fit naturally into films like My Cousin Vinny, Forrest Gump, and Sweet Home Alabama. Bob Penny died peacefully on December 25, 2022, at the age of 87 in Huntsville, Alabama, after facing declining health during his later years. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $1 million. His passing carried a quieter kind of sadness, because he represented an older generation of performers who entered acting for the craft rather than fame. Mel Stuart, as Calvin Peterson. Calvin Peterson is wisdom touched by exhaustion, the older figure whose warmth and emotional steadiness gave In the Heat of the Night another layer of humanity. Mel Stuart, born September 16, 1929, was around 61 when he appeared on the series in 1990, and he brought the calm confidence of a performer who had already spent decades mastering television, music, and theater. His performances carried humor, intelligence, and the emotional rhythm of someone who had seen both struggle and survival. But behind the scenes, Stewart's personal life became increasingly painful due to severe alcoholism. Years of heavy drinking damaged his marriage and deeply strained his relationships with his children, who endured long periods of neglect and emotional distance caused by his addiction and angry outbursts while intoxicated. Despite of his difficulties, Stewart was widely recognized for roles in All in the Family and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, while also building a respected reputation as a jazz musician, director, and acting teacher for young black performers in San Francisco. Mel Stuart died on February 24, 2002, at the age of 72 after suffering serious complications from Alzheimer's disease. During the final years of his life, the illness slowly erased his memories, his music, and even recognition of the people closest to him. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $1.5 million. His ending carried a tragic irony for a man whose life had been built around performance, storytelling, and memory itself. Pat Hingle, as Daddy Roy Eversole / Judge Roy Eversole. Judge Roy Eversole is old Southern authority hardened by time, the intimidating patriarch whose voice and presence carried the weight of power, pride, and survival. Pat Hingle, born July 19, 1924, was around 69 when he appeared on In the Heat of the Night in 1993, and he gave Eversole the feeling of a man who had spent decades forcing himself through pain. Beneath the intimidation was physical exhaustion and emotional damage that audiences could almost feel through the screen. That realism came from his own life. In 1959, while preparing for what could have been the defining lead role of his career in Elmer Gantry, Hingle suffered a horrific elevator accident that nearly killed him. He fell nearly 10 meters down an elevator shaft, shattered multiple bones, lost a finger, and spent more than a year recovering. The role eventually went to Burt Lancaster, who later won an Oscar for it. Though Hingle survived and continued acting, he spent the next 50 years living with severe chronic pain that affected both his career and personal life, contributing to the collapse of his first marriage. Pat Hingle died on January 3, 2009, at the age of 84 after battling myelodysplastic syndrome, a serious blood and bone marrow disease. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $4 million. Even during his final years, he continued carrying the physical consequences of the accident that changed his life forever. Judge Roy Eversole endures because Pat Hingle made power feel wounded, intimidating, and painfully durable. Ted Manson, as Elmer, is the kind of small-town face that makes Southern crime stories feel real, the weathered older man whose quiet presence carried the exhaustion and hardship of rural America. At 61 years old, he brought the character a rough authenticity, shaped by decades of struggle both on screen and off. Manson played him with the quiet realism of someone audiences might actually meet in a small southern town. Off-screen, his life reflected the difficult reality faced by many working actors in Hollywood. Manson spent years dealing with unstable income, financial pressure, and the insecurity of surviving as a lifelong character actor without the protection of major celebrity success. Despite those struggles, he maintained a steady family life with his wife, Jean Manson, while living far from Hollywood glamour in Georgia. His deeply lined face and worn-down screen presence later helped him stand out in films like Driving Miss Daisy, Fried Green Tomatoes, and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Ted Manson died on June 1, 2008, at the age of 81 after suffering complications from chronic heart failure. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth remained $1 million despite decades of acting work. His passing carried a quiet sadness because he represented an entire generation of overlooked supporting actors who helped make American film and television feel believable. Bruce Kirby as Deputy Chief Harlan Cassidy. Deputy Chief Harlan Cassidy is old-school police authority, the veteran lawman whose tired face and steady voice made In the Heat of the Night feel connected to an older generation of crime drama. Bruce Kirby, born April 24, 1925, joined the series at 62 years old, and he brought Cassidy the quiet realism of a man who looked like he had spent decades inside interrogation rooms and police stations. He brought calmness, patience, and emotional weariness into characters that could have easily become stereotypes. Off-screen, his life carried a much deeper sadness than most viewers realized. After 2 marriages, he eventually found stability with his second wife, Roz Bernstein, whom he remained with until his death. But the greatest tragedy of his life came in 2006 when his son, actor Bruno Kirby of When Harry Met Sally, died suddenly from leukemia at only 57 years old. The loss devastated Bruce Kirby and left a grief that quietly followed him through his final years. Despite of all his sadness, Kirby became one of Hollywood's most recognizable character actors, especially through police roles in series like Columbo and later the Oscar-winning film Crash. Bruce Kirby died on January 24, 2021, at the age of 95 due to complications of old age at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $2 million. Though he spent decades playing supporting characters rather than leading men, his face became permanently tied to classic American television. Bobby Short as Cheese Collins. Cheese Collins is smooth charm hiding years of survival, the elegant musician whose presence brought style, rhythm, and old-school sophistication into In the Heat of the Night. Bobby Short joined the series in his late 60s in 1991, and he gave Cheese the effortless confidence of a man who had already spent decades commanding rooms long before television cameras arrived. He brought sophistication, emotional control, and the feeling of someone who understood both glamour and loneliness at the same time. Born into a poor family with 10 children in Illinois, Short taught himself piano at 4 years old and was already performing to help support his family by the age of 12. Outside acting, he became one of America's greatest cabaret and jazz performers, spending more than 35 years entertaining New York high society at the Carlyle Hotel while earning Grammy recognition and later being honored as a living legend by the Library of Congress. However, his real life carried enormous hidden pressure beneath the polished image. As a successful black entertainer moving through wealthy white social circles during the mid-20th century, Short constantly felt the need to appear flawless in public. He never married or had children, and throughout much of his career he quietly endured rumors surrounding his sexuality during an era when American society remained deeply unforgiving toward private differences. Bobby Short died on March 21, 2005, at the age of 80 after a short battle with acute leukemia at New York Presbyterian Hospital. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around $5 million, largely earned through decades of music performances and royalties. His passing marked the end of a uniquely elegant era of American nightlife and jazz culture. Rosemary Murphy as Joanna Allen. Joanna Allen is elegance shaped by loneliness, the refined Southern woman whose intelligence and emotional restraint brought a quieter kind of sophistication into In the Heat of the Night. Rosemary Murphy joined the series in her 60s, and she gave Joanna the graceful confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime observing people rather than trying to impress them. Her performances carried intelligence, dignity, and the subtle sadness of someone used to emotional distance. Off-screen, Murphy's life reflected much of that same solitude. She never married, had no children, and devoted nearly 60 years entirely to acting and theater. She later became known for acclaimed work on Broadway and unforgettable performances in productions like To Kill a Mockingbird. While her dedication made her deeply respected in artistic circles, it also left her increasingly isolated during old age as many of her longtime colleagues and friends gradually passed away around her. Rosemary Murphy died on July 5, 2014, at the age of 89 after a short battle with esophageal cancer in Manhattan. At the time of her death, her estimated net worth was around $3 million. Even in later years, she remained admired as one of the great actresses of stage and screen whose career valued depth over celebrity. Joanna Allen endures because Rosemary Murphy made elegance feel intelligent, restrained, and quietly lonely. So after 38 years, In the Heat of the Night became more than just a crime drama. Behind the badges, investigations, and small-town tensions were real lives filled with addiction, heartbreak, loneliness, survival, and unforgettable legacy. Which cast member's story shocked you the most? And who do you still miss today? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more then and now updates from the shows that shaped television history.